Question: what is this due process clause? Is there a clear definition or just this very vague phrase? No? Unsam ng due process? Atong ning discuss sa atong mga niaging video. If wala pa mo kapaminaw ato, please check our previous videos. Daghan ta nga tong mga examples, learnings in relation to the due process clause, no? Our right to due process of law. So, is there a clear definition or is it just vague, no? Imprecise. Unsam nang vague? Ito Google. Imprecise, unclear, uncertain, indefinite. Saan na po-translate sa Bisaya? Dili kayo klaro. Way klarong utlanan. Way klarong definition. Walay klarong boundaries. No? Vague. So, in a certain part of the decision of the court, no, gidiscuss ni siya. Muna itong storyaan karon nga video. Ngano kaning due process clause, murag lisod man kayo sabton. Due process, duha ka words, pero lisod siya sabton ba. Dili siya exact ang iyang mga definition, no? Dili klaro, dili clear, imprecise, no? Way klarong utlanan ug sayuta pa. So, hello everyone. I am Attorney John Edmund Ruz and you are listening to the show Rights of the Accused, no? In this show, we will spend a few minutes of the present to gather lessons from the past as an investment for their future. So you must know, no, nga naay decision sa korte karaan na ni, no, still in the 1987 case of Inot, no, if I'm not mistaken. The court discussed why the due process clause is vague, no? It is part of the art of constitution making that the provisions of the charter be cast in precise and unmistakable language to avoid controversies that might arise on their correct interpretation. So, muna yung general rule, no? Kung magbuhat kag kontrata, considering that the contract is the law between the parties, or kung senador ka, congressman, kung magbuhat o balaod, samot ta kung constitution, no? Magbuhat mo og saligang batas, the main law of the land. Part na siya sa pagdraft o balaod, no? Contracts, laws, constitution, it is part of the art of constitution making or law making siguro, that the provisions of the charter be cast in precise and unmistakable language. Meaning, kung sa Bisaya pa nga lang, klaro og tataw, no? Igbasa nimo sa balaod, clear ang interpretation aning balaod kana nga phrase. Usa ra interpretation, dili pwede duha ka interpretation. Tagata mo example. Permi ko makita ani sa eskwelahan. Kana isulti ni mga butang dito sa gate sa school, no wearing of slippers. No wearing of slippers. Kita siguro mas sa eskwelahan or kana mga uban nga opisina, dako kay suwat, no wearing of slippers. Kana siya is not precise, no? It is not in a precise and unmistakable language. Why? Kung imo na i-interpret og sakto, the first interpretation would be, di ka pwede masuod nga magchinilas. Kung ako pod, no, my own interpretation, kung gachinilas ko, igabot na ko sa eskwelahan, uy, di man di pwede suoton ang chinilas. O di, tangtangon ang chinilas, isuod sa bag, maglakaw ka itong suod ka sa eskwelahan, magtiniil, no, barefoot. Kaya ang gisulti raman is bawal masuod magchinilas. Kung tangtangon ni mong chinilas, pwede na, no? Meaning, even that very basic example, nga makita ni mo permis sa mga eskwelahan, kaya ako pagbata na ako, muna ako makita, school, no wearing of slippers. Pwede rin tangtangon ng chinilas, magtiniil ta masuod sa eskwelahan. That is not my fault. Sa nasa gasuwat sa signboard. Kay siya gabuhat sa balaod, iyat ang giklaro. Dapat adto iyang gisuwat no? Dili no wearing of slippers. Kang iyang gisuwat unta adto nga wear only closed footwear, or all people entering the premises must wear closed footwear or shoes. Kana siguro magdol-dol tinuod. Di ka pwede magtiniil. Di po ka pwede magchinilas. Kailangan yung ka magsapatos, no? So kana, that is not 100% perfect, but it is near precision, no? Near ang iyang pagka-precise and unmistakable language to avoid controversies. Kaya of course, musulti lang ka kanila to example na kaysa yun. No wearing of slippers inside the school premises. Ang kontrobersya na kung tanang tao magtiniil, kay pag-abot nila sa campus sa school, gatsinilas man sila, hindi makapasudlon kung magtsinilas. So pwede din magtiniil kay no wearing of slippers raman. So mo na siya nga as a general rule, magsuwat kay kag balaod, prohibition, contracts, no? It is an art, no? Part of the art of contract making, constitution making, law making, rule making, that the provisions of the charter, no? Of the law, the contract, the constitution, the rules be cast, no? So gisuwat in a precise and unmistakable language to avoid controversies. When you read a certain phrase in a law, if possible, the interpretation should be only one interpretation. It should not create dual, triple, or 4 types of interpretation on one phrase, no? If you will see those type of laws, those are normally dinalian, no? Or kuwang gyud ang pagsuwat sa law generally, no? Dili maayo pagkasuwat. That is the ideal, precise, and unmistakable language. In the case of the due process clause, no, mo nag-explain sa korte. Ano ang due process clause? Dili man precise and unmistakable language. In the case of the due process clause, however, this rule was deliberately not followed, and the wording was purposely kept ambiguous. So gituyo siya nga vague, ambiguous. Masyag principle ba that is prone to multiple types of interpretation. So kanya imong ma-interpret na ning due process clause, mura siya tubig, no? Pwede mo fit sa any type of container. It should be present in every dealings we have, no? With others, with the government. Mura siya nga ang akong masud sa akong mind, no? That is why the due process clause was deliberately not made in a precise and unmistakable language, and the wording was purposely kept ambiguous. Ako basahon na portion sa kaso eh. The due process clause was kept intentionally vague so it would remain also conveniently resilient. Kay ang changes brought about by time, paspas kay ba? The Constitution cannot be, it is not ideal to always amend your Constitution. So, it must be resilient. It can adapt through the changes brought about by time. That is the purpose behind its vagueness, no? Ambiguity. This was felt necessary because due process is not like some provisions of the fundamental law, an iron rule laying down an implacable and immutable command for all seasons and all persons. Flexibility must be the best virtue of the guarantee of the due process of law. The very elasticity, no? Elastic ang application sa due process of law, no? Or due process clause. The very elasticity of the due process clause was meant to make it adapt easily to every situation, enlarging or constricting its protection as the changing times and circumstances may require. So, adaptability ni, no? Kung sa Bisaya pa, or di Bisaya, no? Dali maka-adjust ang due process clause sa changes or kausaban nga dala sa panahon, no? Kada panahon magkausaban, magka-modern, Sa una way internet, karon na internet. Sa una ang murag auto karabaw, karon auto na gyud, no? So the changing times, the changes brought about by time is so unpredictable and fast that the due process clause was made ambiguous and vague intentionally so that it will be applicable even years after. Imagine this due process clause that we are talking about at present, no? Atong due process clause is in the 1987 Constitution. Today, it is already 2020. So, the due process clause is still applicable despite the modernization, the changes brought about by time. So, it is in fact, no, amazing ba, the wisdom behind the framers of the Constitution to keep intentionally vague the due process clause so that it will remain conveniently resilient even if it is tested by the changes brought about by time. Okay, so that is the reason why the due process clause is vague. It is the reason why the due process clause is elastic, no? So it was intentionally kept vague, no? The due process clause, it was not cast in precise and unmistakable language. Mura siya gihimo siyang elastic, wala siya gihimong solid, no? Clear ang boundaries. Unlike like the contracts, laws, where it can be easily amended, the Constitution has to last for decades. So it must be something the framers of the Constitution want the due process clause resilient through times, no? So that is the reason why, as a general rule, when provisions of a charter are casted, no, prepared, like the contracts, magbuhat kag contracts, buhat kag balaod, rules, mga city ordinance, barangay ordinance, they should be framed in a manner that it is very precise and unmistakable. So when you interpret the provisions of the barangay ordinance, the school rules and regulations, the city ordinance, it must be interpreted in only one manner, no? Usa ra gyud dapat ang interpretation. It should not be like our example nga makita nimo sa eskwelahan ang dako kay signboard, no slippers allowed inside, no? Duhang interpretation. First, dili pwede mag-slipper, so kailangan magsapatos. Ang second is igsulod, pwede ra day magtiniil. So dili gyapon makuha ang objective sa balaod. Nga ang intention di sa balaod adto, dapat kumusuod ka sa campus sa eskwelahan, magsapatos yun mo. So may tabo, daghan nung gatiniil suod sa eskwelahan, no? Ridiculous na ng example, but it will bring home the point nga kung magbuhat kag balaod, dapat klaro og tataw. Inibasa nimo ani, usa ra gyud ang interpretation. Dili pwede duha or tulong interpretation kay maka-cause na og controversy, dispute. Mo na general rule. Ang exception kaning intention nga to keep the due process clause vague, no, undefined, masyag elastic, no, ambiguous, no? This was intentional, no, by design in order to keep it resilient, no, considering that it has to last and govern the country for several decades, no? The due process clause has to protect the citizens of the republic for decades. So it must be able to adapt to the changes brought about by time. So this is an exception to the general rule nga it is still a very effective law even if it was not cast in a precise and unmistakable language. Okay? So muna ang topic sa itong video karon, humanani. And if you like our video, click the like button, share, and subscribe. Thank you.